Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Poole, and I am a genetic counselor in Southern California. I am also one of this year's SCGC AEC co-chairs. It is so amazing to have you all here with us today for the SCGC 4th Annual Education Conference. As you are aware, the conference is entirely virtual again this year, and this was a decision the AEC committee had to make early in the planning process, as so much was still unknown about the COVID-19 pandemic and how it may impact our ability to host a large gathering in 2021. While we all long to be back together in person, we are grateful that you decided to join us again this year through your computer screens, which hopefully means in some comfy loungewear and flip-flops. This is now our second virtual AEC, and we hope that you enjoy some of the new and improved features available to all attendees this year. It really could take me an hour or more to thoroughly go through everything you can plan to enjoy today, but I want to just briefly touch on some key points about the AEC. By now, hopefully you have had some time to explore the virtual portal a bit. If you haven't already, I recommend you take time to read through the announcements while in the lobby. It is filled with useful information that you can refer to throughout the day. You can also view the live event feed, social media feed, and post a picture of yourself using the photo booth, all right there in the lobby. CEU notice. So if you are claiming CEUs for today, you will need to verify your attendance for each session you attend. All you'll need to do to verify attendance is answer a simple quiz question that will pop up on your screen shortly after each session begins. Once you answer the question and click submit, your attendance is verified. There is no need to collect and keep track of any codes. You will also need to complete the post-conference survey before September 3rd, and a link to the survey can be found on the announcements wall in the lobby, but it will also be emailed to you after the conference. If you look to the left side of your screen, you'll see the menu, which allows you to click to each of the various sections in the virtual portal. The sessions page, which you by now have found, shows the agenda and upcoming talks. Our program today includes plenary sessions, educational breakouts, platform research presentations, sponsored lunchtime talks, and a poster session. A little bit of everything. To join a talk, you just click on the title and wait for it to begin. If it hasn't already started, you'll wait for a bit. If the talk is in progress, you'll join it live. All attendees have the option of using closed captioning, which you can turn on and off by clicking on the button below the video window. You can also chat with other attendees and ask the speaker questions during each session by using the chat feature on the right-hand side of the screen. I want to make sure you're aware that our gold level sponsors will be giving talks from 12 to 1, so be sure to grab some food and meet us back here for some lunchtime learning. But to visit with our wonderful sponsors at any time throughout the day, just head over to the exhibit hall. You can review the materials they have provided and chat live with the representatives. The exhibit hall will also be where you head at 4 p.m. to participate in the engagement hour and join the sponsors for their concurrent talks. The posters hall will be open all day for you to view the student and research posters, and then the poster authors will be available to answer questions via live chat from 1 to 1:45 p.m. To get CEU credit for attending the poster session, you must first join the session from the agenda and answer the simple attendance verification quiz, as I described earlier. Once you have visited all the posters, we ask that you visit the booth called Poster Contest Voting Booth and vote for your favorite poster. The poster with the most votes will be announced today, and the author will win a prize. You can also find the Jobs and Announcements booth and an SCGC information booth in the posters hall, so there's lots to do in there. Completely new this year, we have the SCGC treasure hunt, which I see lots of you have already noticed. We strongly urge you to get involved and show your competitive side by searching codes throughout the virtual portal, in social media posts, and even in recent emails from SCGC. All you'll need to do is click on the SCGC Treasure Hunt tab and enter each code you find before 5:15 tonight. We have up to 13 fabulous prizes available for those who earn the most points. For more information about the rules and prizes, please be sure to read the treasure hunt instructions posted in the lobby. Lastly, if you need help or have questions throughout the day, please refer to the help section in the menu. There is a brief video to review some of the information I am discussing now and information about who you can contact with specific questions about the virtual portal or AEC. Before moving on to our next speaker, I just want to thank our supportive sponsors who helped us make our virtual AEC vision a reality. And of course, I would like to thank our SCGC AEC Planning Committee. None of this would have been possible without the dedication and hard work of this amazing team. They have really gone above and beyond expectations to make today a standout event for all in attendance. I will now pass the mic to the president of SCGC, Michelle Fox, who will provide the opening remarks.
I join in Amy's warm welcome to everyone today. 2021 continues to be a year filled with challenges at home, at work, and within SCGC. SCGC members met the challenges head-on with bravery, resilience, and creativity. Currently, SCGC has 285 members. I would like to highlight some of our achievements in 2021. Our website has been updated, a project led by Secretary Lauren Seams, Membership Chair Ariella Emery, Marketing Chair Carol Coe, and former Secretary Ping Gong. New features on the website include membership update capabilities, a form for job postings and announcements, and capabilities for us to hold our first election in the next few weeks. As issues surrounding justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion became and remain foremost in our minds, we polled the SCGC membership on the NSGC JEDI strategies, and then held a town hall meeting to discuss the polling results and steps forward, both for SCGC and NSGC. Our survey and suggestions were submitted to NSGC. DEI efforts are led by our DEI chair, Nydia Santiago-Neal, Stacy Wan, with help from Ping Gong. Recommendations discussed will inform our JEDI work during the coming year. Luckily, we had the foresight, as Amy mentioned, to plan a virtual AEC experience again this year. The work that has gone into this conference is formidable. I am in awe of all the hard work by our AEC meeting chairs, Amy Poole and Jamie Beavers, the committee chairs and committee members who made this day possible. Today, we have 366 attendees, 183 genetic counselors, 69 graduate genetic counseling students, 11 genetic counseling assistants, 37 undergrads, 166 first-time attendees, and other healthcare providers representing 91 organizations. 281 attendees are from Southern California and 82 from other states, and 10 outside the US. We have more sponsors than ever before, and we thank them for their support. One of the hardest things I've had to do as a parent, genetic counselor, supervisor, and president of SCGC is to learn how to let go. My term as SCGC president ends on December 31st, 2021. Words cannot express my gratitude to everyone who has made these last years successful, satisfying, and one of the best experiences of my genetic counseling career. Today, I'm happy to announce our slate of officers and tell you how we will be moving forward to have more inclusive elections for the future. On August 23rd, an email will be sent out to the membership with voting instructions for a slate of officers and board members for the 2022 term. SCGC is following the NSGC tradition by developing a slate of officers and asking the membership to approve the slate rather than holding a contested election. The 2022 slate has been selected from the individuals who have volunteered during the last 3 years. We urge all full members to vote during the voting period from August 23rd to September the 10th. The 2022 slate includes President Stacy Wan, Secretary Lauren Seams, Treasurer Bill Herbert, and the Board of Director members, the DEI Chair, Nydia Santiago-Neal, the Membership Chair, Ariella Emery, the Outreach and Community Engagement Chair, Lauren Gima, and the Marketing Chair, Carol Coe. Additionally, our Education Committee Chair position is currently vacant, and so we encourage members to write in candidate suggestions to help us fill that position. The AEC co-chairs will be ad hoc board members. To encourage participation and include the broader membership in selecting the future officers and board of directors in September, we will be asking for volunteers for the 2023 nominating committee. The nominating committee will be composed of the outgoing president, serving as chair, the membership chair, and 3 SCGC members. Following the formation of the nominating committee, an open call to the membership to nominate colleagues or themselves for open board member positions will be available in October. The nominating committee's charge is to review the applicants and create the slate for 2023. Eligibility requirements and responsibility for the board positions will be posted on the website. The open positions for 2023 will be President-elect, Treasurer-elect, Marketing Chair, and Education Chair. The Secretary, DEI, Membership, and Outreach Chairs will continue their terms. Terms are for 2 years. The AEC co-chairs will again be yearly ad hoc positions. We hope you enjoy today, win prizes, learn a lot, chat with friends, and think about volunteering with SCGC. We are the voice of Southern California genetic counselors who represent the breadth and depth of the genetic counseling profession. Thank you all, and I am happy to introduce you to Rebecca Lachey, our program chair, who has worked tirelessly on this meeting and will introduce our first speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for handing it over, and thanks, Amy and Michelle, for getting today started. I am thrilled to introduce our first speakers for today. Today, we will be starting off with a talk about mentoring with Deanna Erwin, Elise Sobotka, and Lauren Gima. Deanna Erwin is a licensed board-certified genetic counselor specializing in cancer genetics. She has a master's degree in genetic counseling from the University of Michigan. Ms. Erwin joined the City of Hope Division of Clinical Cancer Genomics in 2019. She has mentored several students formally through graduate program mentorship initiatives. Fun fact, despite being from the East Coast, since moving to California, she has started doing winter sports, snowboarding, and snowshoeing. Elise is a genetic counselor specializing in cancer genetics. She has a Master of Science in Genetic Counseling and a Master of Public Health in Health Management and Policy from the University of Michigan. She joined the City of Hope Center for Precision Medicine in Duarte, California in July 2020 after graduating from the University of Michigan. Fun fact, she is an avid biker, indoors and outdoors, and hopes to train for a triathlon in the future. Lauren is a board-certified licensed genetic counselor at City of Hope in Duarte, California, where she specializes in clinical cancer genomics. She earned her MS degree in genetic counseling from Northwestern University. She has served as a community mentor for the KGI Genetic Counseling Program, the Minority Genetics Professionals Network, and for genetic counseling assistants at City of Hope. She is also a clinical rotation supervisor for students of the KGI, UCI, and UCLA genetic counseling programs. Fun fact, in college, she watched the first Fast and the Furious movie so many times with a group of friends that they could recite the entire film. And please check out their full bios as well as the bios for all other speakers today in the platform. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to these first speakers to get us started. And feel free to type any problems in the chat or any questions in the Q&A, as we will try to reserve some time at the end to answer some questions. Thank you.
Hi, just pulling up my slides. All right, so thanks so much for that introduction. My name is Elise Sobotka, and again, I am a genetic counselor at City of Hope, and myself and both of my colleagues, Deanna, Erwin, and Lauren Gima, are really excited to be here today to present on a topic that we feel is really important to our field, which is mentorship. So specifically, how does mentorship help the field of genetic counseling move forward? So we have no conflicts of interest to disclose. And the learning objectives for our talk today are to describe the importance of mentorship and how to develop mentor-mentee relationships, compile suggestions to create a successful mentor-mentee relationship, identify mentorship programs and resources to strengthen the mentorship relationship, and discuss experiences in mentorship from both the mentor and mentee perspective. So you heard a little bit about our experience in the bios, but in terms of different perspectives, I will be talking about my experience being a mentee. Lauren will talk about her experience as a newer mentor, and Deanna will talk about her experience as someone who's been mentoring for a bit longer. But we first wanted to start by considering, what is mentorship? How would we define it? What is involved? And before we kind of provide some perspective about how others have defined mentorship, we're kind of interested, what does this word or idea of mentorship mean to you all? So we are actually going to be posting a link in the chat, which we hope you guys will follow, to an outside site, which will kind of ask, what is a phrase or some words that maybe you associate with mentorship.
So you guys might see on your screen now either a QR code that you can use your cell phone to open up a new browser on your cell, or you can go to slido.com and then enter this room number. And I am about to launch the poll. The question that Elise just posed should show up, and then we encourage you to share your thoughts.
Okay, so seeing guidance is one of the main words. Teaching, support. I see a lot of different words. So a lot of different ways that you guys think about mentorship. We'll give it a few more seconds. Okay, well, I think we got a lot of responses, so thank you all for participating. But yeah, again, I'm seeing role model, teaching, guidance, support as kind of the main words. A lot of other different types of words, but seeing other things like being a guide, feedback, sharing, empowering, supporting growth. So great. So yeah, thanks so much for those responses. I think there were some certain ideas that came out, but there were a lot of different things that you all sort of associate with mentorship. And I think that really highlights that when we think about actually defining mentorship, there maybe isn't one single definition. So as we highlight in our talk, there are a multitude of ways in which mentorship can present itself, and many different ways that mentorship may look within a mentor or mentee relationship. However, one definition that may encompass some important aspects is, it's a relationship between a less experienced mentee and a more experienced individual, the mentor, where that mentee is really being guided through career and psychosocial advancement. So, mentees may receive things like advice, guidance, support, help from their mentor. So I think I saw some of those words in the word cloud as well. But again, this doesn't really encompass all the different ways that mentorship relationships, may present themselves. So mentorship can come in a lot of different forms. We often think about mentorship as being formal, but it can be informal as well. There are other types of models of mentorship relationships than just the one-on-one or face-to-face relationship. And sometimes mentorship can be based off a certain type of relationship or with a certain goal in mind. So here are some different types of mentorship that have been identified in some of the literature on mentorship. This is definitely not an exhaustive list, but these are some different types of mentorship that we just wanted to highlight to kind of show the diversity of what mentorship looks like. So first, of course, is formal mentorship. So this may be traditionally what you think of when you think of mentorship. Mentors or mentees are usually connected through some sort of formal program. There may be a lot of structure in that relationship that's dictated by the program, and it is very intentional. So likely the mentor and the mentee, sought out mentorship by being involved in that program. However, mentorship can also be completely informal. So maybe it develops spontaneously between two individuals. The mentor and mentee may have had some sort of relationship before they started a mentorship relationship. And this type of mentorship can be really powerful. So, in increasing retention, satisfaction, morale among mentees. But without structure, these types of relationships might be short term, or they may fall apart, if the mentor and mentee are not intentional about keeping that relationship going. So a type of informal mentorship, although it can also be formal, that I wanted to highlight is called reverse mentorship. So instead of the traditional model where a less experienced person is mentored by a more experienced person, this is actually the reverse. So the less experienced or younger individual maybe takes on that mentorship role. Or the mentor role. So this can be a great way to engage newer or younger colleagues. And importantly, because, these individuals may be younger or from a different generation, this may help drive important cultural change or, help increase knowledge about technology. Given that so much of the genetic counseling workforce is younger, I think this is definitely a really interesting type of mentorship to think about within our field. So there are also many different ways that mentorship can be delivered. So there's kind of the traditional one-to-one relationship between, again, a less experienced mentee and a more experienced mentor. However, sometimes someone might be mentored by their own peers, so someone of the same rank or training. Mentorship can occur in a group setting where the mentor is providing mentorship to more than one person at the same time. And finally, The literature and articles on mentorship have singled out virtual mentorship as a different type. However, particularly in the wake of COVID, I bet we might argue that mentorship provided virtually maybe wouldn't drastically different than mentorship that might be delivered in person. And then mentorship can be based on certain types of relationships where there may be a goal with that relationship in mind. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are some different types of mentorship that maybe you might have not considered before. So diverse mentoring is mentoring between individuals of different demographic backgrounds, and that may allow the mentor and mentee to explore things like their perceptions, lived experiences, etc., and ultimately may help increase diversity. I think it's important to also mention maybe the opposite of this, which is often described as identity-based mentorship. So the mentee and mentor come from similar demographic backgrounds or have similar identities. So that's also a very powerful type of mentorship that has important benefits. Cultural mentoring is a similar idea where instead individuals may be from different cultural backgrounds. Multi-level mentoring is when mentoring occurs across organizational levels. So this may be aligned with that institution's missions and policies and designed to achieve a certain goal, such as retention of employees. And finally, co-mentoring or collaborative mentoring is when two individuals are providing mentorship to each other at the same time. So these individuals may have different knowledge or expertise to share with the other person. And finally, within a mentorship relationship, the mentor may take on many different roles. So mentorship may not be any single one of these roles, but maybe that mentor may be a coach. They may be guiding the mentee towards a specific or measurable outcome. They might be a teacher and their focus is to share knowledge with the mentee. And finally, they may act as a sponsor. So maybe their goal is to advocate for the mentee and help them make connections. So now that we have some vocabulary around what mentorship is and the different ways in which mentorship can present itself, I want to turn things over to Deanna to discuss why mentorship is actually important.
Need to unmute. Thank you, Elise, for setting up such a great framework about what mentorship is. And we're going to break down how it is so beneficial and why it's important. So to start off, we're going to have a poll, so it should be appearing in your section. And you can select one option, experience as a mentor, experience as a mentee, both experience as a mentor and a mentee, or no experience. And really what we're trying to suss out is what is your experience with mentorship? And once you finish out the poll, if you could just include in the chat maybe 1 or 2 words about what you valued out of a mentorship relationship, if you've had any. And we'll give everyone just a moment or so to fill out the poll. Okay. The votes are continuing to come in, and as we're looking at it, it looks like most people have experience both as a mentor and a mentee. So we have a lot of folks that have some experience. So I'm excited that everyone's joining the talk, and a good proportion of folks that have actually had no experience. And to go through the chat, we're seeing support, inspiration. I saw a couple of the phrases that also came up, empowerment, that came from the word cloud, which I love, and also mutual benefit. And, keep typing in the chat. We're going to keep trying to look and toggle between the two. But really mentorship, when programs are set up appropriately, when it is done right, it is one of those few situations where everyone can benefit, the organization, the mentors, and the mentees. And we saw some of that in that word cloud like we talked about. And mentorship has been studied for decades. And there's a lot of data, there's a lot of information supporting mentorship. A lot of the data that I'm going to be presenting will be talking about formal mentorship, though there's a lot about informal and some of the other types that Elise spoke about. And to highlight, we know that both mentors and mentees, they are more likely to advance in pay grade. They can, both mentors and mentees are more likely to remain in a company. Retention rates are higher for those that participate in mentorship. And we also know that mentorship has a more effective impact than other diversity initiatives, such as voluntary training and targeted recruitment, and specifically helps with increased minority representation at management level, and also helps with retention rates, particularly for minorities and women. So it's very clear that mentorship works, but the question is, how does it work? And what we see when we look at mentorship and kind of the trajectory that it can have is it can help expedite your career growth. And it does that through a couple of different ways. One, it creates accountability. So we saw in the word cloud talking about mutual benefit, partnership, guidance, and support. When you have a mentor, the role is for them to kind of be your partner, your buddy. The mentee's role is to help pick out some goals, and you kind of work together. You make sure that you have someone keeping you on track. Mentors and mentees also allow each other to save time and energy. You don't necessarily have to look something up. You can bounce off each other. You can have a discussion. And this is one of these situations where I think a lot of times with mentorship, we saw, wisdom, guidance, advice popping up in the word cloud. It doesn't have to be that way. Mentorship can be reciprocal. You learn from your mentee, the mentee learns from you. Both can benefit by sharing that knowledge. And when we share that knowledge, it allows us to meet our goals faster. We reduce that learning curve. We're breaking records left and right. Once again, because you're getting a head start, you're getting that information shared at an earlier pace. And some of that information can be reducing the amount of mistakes you make. So you might talk to your mentor and say, I'm thinking of this challenging situation. How would you play that forward? And the mentor, this could be one of these situations where advice and guidance is particularly beneficial. They might say, here's my perspective. Here's a landmine. Let's try to avoid that. And then you have fewer setbacks in your career. You can move forward at a faster rate. And mentors can also provide a roadmap. And a roadmap doesn't mean you necessarily need to follow that to a T. Really, a good mentor-mentee relationship will be focusing on the mentee's goals. We'll be making sure that the mentee achieves their best version of themselves, not necessarily what the mentor's initial road path was. But it can open up a discussion. It can start off with showing, here's where we're successful, or here's an experience of someone being successful, and how to play that forward. So I've provided some general information about how mentorship can expedite career growth and looking at it from the general population. But how does that really work for genetic counselors? And we have some great examples of mentorship. The Minority Genetics Professional Network, in an effort to increase diversity in the field, recognize that mentorship is a core part of that mission. As we talked about in a couple of slides ago, we know that mentorship is more effective with diversity inclusion efforts than other specific diversity efforts. So to help create a supportive and safe environment and to increase the genetic counseling field's efforts in justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, supporting mentorship should be a core part of all of our mission. The other thing that was noted from the Minority Genetics Professionals Network is that there's a lot of need for mentorship. And this isn't unique to the genetic counseling field. Also, in the general population, there aren't enough mentors to meet the need for mentees. Another way to look at the value of genetic counseling and mentorship is looking at the reason why genetic counselors may leave the field. And we have a list here, and I think everyone knows I'm going to highlight a couple of things showing that mentorship can address some of these issues. So just to pull out a couple, we talked about advancement opportunities. We talked about earning potential. Those have been shown to be benefited by mentorship. Also, burnout and creating a supportive work environment. We saw that guidance, we saw that mutual benefit, we saw that support popping up in mentorship. So it can help. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to fix all of these issues, but it can help us kind of keep people in the field. And we know when genetic counselors talk about mentorship, from novice genetic counselors saying, finding a mentor is the most helpful thing I could possibly think of for anyone, which seems like some pretty high praise in my book, to advanced or genetic counselors with advanced skills, really talking about how they grew in their career, how research, how applying for grants, how that pushing, that coaching aspect of mentorship helped them expedite their career growth. 2 recommendations for genetic counselors in their first position, saying it's important to select your first job based on potential mentors. I would argue with that quote saying that it's important to pick any job based on potential mentors, but you can also have mentorship in a variety of different settings, as Lauren will be highlighting. So it doesn't necessarily need to be confined just to your job opportunities. So we've established that mentorship is critical. It's important. We need to be doing it more in the field. We need to have more mentors, but we don't have enough. So what are some of those barriers? And if people can just type in the chat and say some barriers that they think that they see. Choosing wisely, so talking about how do we select mentors. Time is always a barrier. Time. Yes. It's nearly unanimous that time is a barrier. And keep typing in the chat. I like to see all of the responses. There's a bit of a lag on our end. But now that we've identified some of the barriers, what we want to see is how do we get over them? One barrier that didn't pop up in the chat, but I am personally very invested in, is genetic counselors may start mentoring later in their careers. Elise had mentioned genetic counselors, the majority of people in the field have been practicing for less than 10 years. So we have a younger and experienced field. And we have some career ladders that put mentoring as the absolute last stage of being a genetic counselor at level 4. And I personally waited until I felt like I had a strong knowledge base to mentor. So making sure that you understand that you have an experience, you have a perspective, something to share, regardless of where you started in your career or how far you are in your career, is something that I want to highlight. And Lauren will highlight it even better because she started mentoring very early in her career. And we can also see time is the most often cited barrier for mentorship. It's not just for mentors, it's for mentees and institutions. And the other thing that cropped up that we saw in the chat is that human element, that power differential and personality mismatch. This is where mentorship programs tend to fail if they do. It's that how do we match people together so we have a mutually productive relationship? So Lauren's going to go over some possible solutions to these barriers. If we could just have a couple of people throwing in some possible solutions that they think, and I'll go over them very briefly. Okay, now I'm catching up on the chat. I'm seeing burnout, lack of representation, lack of support. Okay. And with some of the barriers that were mentioned, here are some possible solutions. We talked about lack of support experience. Some of these things can be helped by mentorship training, increased support by managers, carving out dedicated time. You know, mentorship is a win-win-win. Everyone wins. Organizations should be supportive of mentorship. So making that argument, there is data ad nauseum, and there are references in our talk to highlight that. And then also talking about the personal relationship, open communication, being flexible, being thoughtful, and being structured. And with that, I will let Lauren take it away. Thank you, everyone, for tossing information in the chat, and we'll continue to look at it.
Great. Thanks, Deanna. So give me a second while I share my screen now. Yep. All right, so let me put this into presentation mode. All All right. Sorry, working off of one screen, guys. So, perfect transition to figure out really how do we end up creating successful mentoring relationships. Now, of course, there's no one right answer for how we do this, but there's a lot of questions that you can ask yourself if you're entering a new mentoring relationship that might help set you up for success. So, first, defining the goal and really what is to be achieved out of this relationship is very important. Um, and then as many of you might have experienced, through formal mentorship, um, organized by an institution or another organization, you often don't have to put that much legwork into picking out a mentor. Often one is assigned to you. So if you're actually going about it outside of some of those more traditional or formal channels, how do you go about picking a mentor? And once you find somebody, how do you build the relationship? What should it look like? And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit more, speaking to some of those barriers and how we overcome them, how we can be our best as both a mentor or a mentee. So, in terms of setting goals, I think it's helpful to try and break things down first to figure out, might you be interested in um, achieving professional goals? For example, perhaps more involvement in teaching, research, presenting, or public speaking, leadership, getting into genetic counseling school. Perhaps you may be more interested in personal goals, um, more involvement in advocacy work, trying to achieve better work life balance. And really narrowing down your mindset there is going to help when trying to sort of find an appropriate mentoring relationship. As Elise mentioned, reverse mentorship could be a really unique opportunity to seek out if perhaps somebody who is more traditionally thought of as a mentor with more experience might want to try something that creates a little bit more less traditional growth, I should say. And as Deanna mentioned, and as you guys mentioned in the chat, time is the biggest barrier for becoming involved in mentorship. So it is always something that should be at the forefront of your mind when entering one of these types of relationships. You want to make sure that your goal is achievable in the realistic time frame that you're able to set aside and dedicate towards this relationship. So, of course, in more formal mentorship programs, it might be a questionnaire, a survey that you complete to get matched up with a mentor. But if you're looking for a mentor outside of these more formal channels, really, where do you start? So I would say start broadly by thinking about some of these questions, like in general, who do you look up to? Um, who do you perhaps already know? I would say and encourage you to think further outside of just sort of your first degree of relationships here. Check those outer rings of your networks. You might know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody that might be um, either achieving or have achieved a goal that you personally, are looking towards starting. So I think it's really important to figure out, besides looking up to that person, perhaps as a role model, do they have the experience reaching a similar goal? Because um, you want to make sure that they might have, that quote unquote loose roadmap that Deanna had mentioned earlier to hopefully help get you to your goal. If you're thinking more specifically about a professional mentor, of course, it's really easy to look at who is your role model at work or within your institution or organization. Whose job would you want to have in the near or short term future? Near or long term future, I should say. Um, and it might be really important for you to consider an identity based mentor. So, somebody who shares a common identity with you, whether that be, for example, cultural identity, spiritual or religious identity, gender identity, different abilities, etc. Because, of course, we know that the more we perceive to have in common with somebody, the deeper our connections tend to be, and that can only help things. So when you eventually identify that person that you feel like might be a good fit for your mentor, um, if it's not something that's formally set up, start by a informal ask. Informational interviews are completely appropriate here. As Elise mentioned, virtual mentoring is kind of all that's happening right now in many cases. So, sending a quick invite for a chat is completely appropriate here. And that informal chat will also give you the opportunity just to get to know that person a little bit better, see if your personalities match and could mesh well together to help you achieve this goal. And if it seems like a good fit, make the ask without sort of pressure of obligation to the mentor. So keep in mind, it's not something that they have to do for you, but hopefully they will be able to do and want to be able to help you do. So once you are hopefully in one of those mentoring relationships, these are some things to kind of keep in mind and mutually work towards. We know that successful mentoring relationships are characterized by, first of all, having a mentor with the appropriate experience or training. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need time, years, or experience. It just means you kind of need the right attitude and to have, your own personal experience that might help guide somebody. They're also defined by reciprocity, mutual respect for each other, setting really clear expectations and boundaries. And of course, having that personal connection through shared values can only help things. And often it turns out that a longer term relationship can again help strengthen that bond between mentor and mentee. So, quality mentors, when we're thinking about being our best as a mentor in a mentoring relationship, I think it's really important that mentors are able to establish mutual respect. Typically, there is a little bit of a, inherent dynamic there between mentors and mentees with the experience level. So I think it's up to the mentor to be able to set the tone here and really uphold that throughout the relationship. Hopefully, you should be able to motivate and inspire your mentee to achieve their goal that they've set out, and ultimately to make that time, however small that time commitment might be, because I know that that's hard for everybody. We're all busy. But if it's something that you guys agree upon at the beginning of the relationship, really try and, be true to your word, carve out that time, or be honest about really what time commitments you can make or cannot make. When you're with your mentee, hopefully you are listening with, an open ear and are able to deliver really honest feedback that, again, is hopefully only in your mentee's best interest to help them achieve their goal. And because really in most of these relationships, it's not about the mentor, it's about the mentee and helping them achieve their goal. Not to say that there can't be, of course, reciprocal benefit, but the mentor, should kind of come into it thinking about it more selflessly. Um, and that comes with knowing yourself, knowing your limitations, your boundaries, your biases, and being upfront about those with yourself, not necessarily always openly towards the mentee, but can be a good place to sort of engage in conversation to just make sure that everybody's on the same page. From the mentee perspective, if we're going to be our best as a mentee, being proactive and consistent are two really big things that I think are important. Um, Everybody knows, again, that we're all busy. Time is hard to dedicate to these relationships as meaningful as we know that they are. So, being proactive and consistent in terms of setting up meetings, following through, perhaps nudging your mentor or reminding them when there's an upcoming meeting or deadline is really helpful in maintaining that relationship. And of course, we've talked about goals a lot, but just making sure that from the outset, you're having realistic expectations and goals going into things. Being open to the feedback that you receive from your mentor, knowing that hopefully everything that you are hearing is from a positive place, hoping only for your success here. And lastly, diversifying perhaps. It's really hard for one mentor or one person to be everything to you to help achieve various goals. So perhaps consider a team of mentors to help in various aspects to help achieve various goals that you might have. So this is in no way an exhaustive list. It's very much scratching the surface, but for those of you who may already be interested in mentoring or have had past experiences and perhaps want to also continue diversifying and being involved in mentorship, um, here are some very general ideas in terms of how to get started. So if we're thinking about genetic counseling specifically, the NSGC Connect is a formal mentorship program set up by the NSGC. You do have to be a member though, so that is one caveat to being able to participate in that program. The Minority Genetics Professionals Network, or MGPN, also has a formal mentorship program set up, but that's available to all. Cannot speak highly enough about our experiences there. And many genetic counseling programs, once you become a student, will already likely have some type of mentorship program built in. Could be that the first year might get paired up with a second year in the program, might get paired with somebody on the faculty or in the community, just to help get your bearings as a future genetic counselor. And for prospective students, I would say, brainstorm and connect with people who might be involved with prospective student interest groups. Either there might be somebody, who perhaps serves as an advisor for that group, or just might know genetic counselors through connections that might be interested in helping to mentor prospective students there. And then speaking more broadly and generally, if you're just looking for mentorship, perhaps outside of genetic counseling specific resources, I would say if you're in school, think about going back to your career center. If you're working, think about going back to your HR department, because it's likely that there might be some resources already out there for you within your organizations that can really help. There's other professional networks that might be of benefit, or identity-based organizations. For example, at City of Hope, I'm a member of, like, for example, the Young Professionals Network or the Women's Professional Network. And those are channels outside of our genetics department that I could look out to when I might want other sort of mentorship opportunities. So we wanted to wrap up today by just giving you our closing thoughts on and experiences about mentorship from our different perspectives.
Yeah, and I'll start kind of from the mentee perspective. So I've had some experience through a formal program offered through my graduate program, as well as, I think times when I've received mentorship more informally. And my main takeaway is very related to the discussion we've had about expectations. So I think it's really important to figure out, as a mentee, what are your expectations? What are you looking for at that relationship, and to communicate that. I definitely went into my experience maybe unsure what I needed or wanted from my mentor. And I think ultimately I didn't utilize them as much as I could have. Because I wasn't, really sure of those expectations. I think maybe there's also an expectation that you have that relationship will come sooner than it does, and it does take time. So, my experience was definitely focused on a specific goal. It was in my last year of school, so the goal of getting my first job and everything related to that. So it was very helpful in reaching that goal. But it sort of ended after that, and I think I realized afterwards how it might have been nicer to have a longer term relationship. There were still a lot of things that I felt I needed mentorship on once I started my job. So I think it's definitely important just to think about what you want or need from mentorship before you get started. And just in terms of informal mentorship, opportunities are everywhere. Don't be afraid to ask for advice, perspective from people you already know, asking how they've gotten to where they are, what are their career goals, etc. I think everybody, no matter where you are in your career, has, something they can provide in terms of knowledge, expertise, perspective, etc.
And so for myself, I am somebody who has also had some experience in both formal and informal mentorship. I was involved in some of the local genetic counseling mentorship programs and the NGPN. And then I also built more of an informal mentoring relationship with one of our GCAs here at City of Hope. And most of this was primarily individual mentoring. I did have one group mentoring experience, which I learned more about myself in terms of what works and doesn't work for me. I learned that perhaps group mentoring was just I bit off a bit more than I could chew in that experience. And I think that was an unexpected um, benefit for me entering that because it's not something that I went into looking for. So my general thoughts are, I think it's really helpful to establish, communication preferences early with your mentor or mentee and be consistent about them. And that this truly is a very mutually beneficial experience. I have personally grown a lot through mentorship, and this is not something that I thought that I had any qualifications for. As Deanna mentioned, I sort of on a whim, without anybody telling me any different, just figured I could sign up to be a mentor after about a year of working in the field and have reaped a lot of unexpected rewards. So I think you don't need the experience that you think you need. You probably already have it. So just go ahead and dive in.
And, giving back to get ahead, that title really spoke to me. I feel like with mentorship, I have benefited so much from the number of mentors that I've spoken about or I've had. So I hadn't talked about my experience as a mentee, but I've had a lot of experiences as a mentee in addition to being a mentor. And without those experiences, I don't think I would have all of the experiences that I have gotten. So just really highlighting the importance of giving back. If you have been a recipient of being a being a mentee, being a mentor, that experience is very satisfying. It helps you feel like you're pushing the field forward and moving things forward. I waited like 5 years before I became a mentor because I was waiting for that experience. So I like to highlight, how wonderful Lauren is with starting so early. But, I think it has been a really good experience that I would encourage everyone to start earlier. I said, wish I started sooner. I should have had like 5 exclamation points after that. And, one thing that I have learned, especially as someone who's been a little bit more established when they've started mentorship, is being aware of your own biases and thought processes. I think when you have more of an experience, you're like, okay, here's how I move things forward. Here's how I was successful, and take a step back and realize your experience is unique to yourself. And really the goal is to facilitate support and development of the mentee.
Great. So as we kind of wrap up today, of course, we would love to hear tips and resources that many of you have. As you mentioned in the poll, most people here have had some type of experience being a mentor or a mentee. So please feel free to drop those in the chat along with any questions that you have. We thank you so much for listening and being so engaged this morning. And here's our references. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have one question. To address failure in matching programs, would matching people based on their personality from Ocean scores make mentorship less likely to fail? I am not familiar with Ocean. I don't know, Elise is nodding her head, maybe she is.
No, I'm not familiar with it either.
Yeah, so from what I've seen in the literature, there is no established or great way or like prescribed way to select these mentorship relationships. Certainly having these types of discussions like personality and having those things available can help with building a mentorship relationship. Some programs, what they do is they have you basically write like a bio and include like, here's what your experience is. Here is, you know, what do you like to do in your spare time, and kind of put it that way. And that way people can kind of self-select. As far as like how other mentorship programs that assign mentors, you know, they've talked about kind of making the same type of thing, those dating personalities, but it's kind of done in a matchmaker situation rather than self-selection. I don't know if Lauren and Elise, you want to weigh in on that?
I would just agree that I think there's probably not one way to figure out how who the perfect mentor would be, because I think it's a lot of just, you know, someone may look really good on paper, and then when you you know, and maybe it doesn't necessarily mean if that is the right fit relationship wise or not. I think, as we've talked about, that can take time to figure out.
Definitely. And actually, I was also seeing some great resources being dropped into the chat. So Anna Victorine posted the website iwanttobeagc.com. They mentor prospective students. Sounds like there's many prospective students on the conference today, as Michelle pointed out. So feel free to use that resource as well. And then Lori Black mentioned that every once in a while there are regional or national offerings on supervision and mentorship trainings. It would be great to have this available as a CEU course. I think that's a really great suggestion, Lori, perhaps for SCGC, for us to incorporate in the future as a CEU opportunity, specifically on mentorship.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. This has been such a great talk. And just for anyone who didn't see it in the Q&A, someone did add a comment that OCEAN, O is for openness, C is for conscientiousness, E is for extroversion, A is for agreeableness, and N is for neuroticism.
Yeah. And those sorts of tests or quizzes, they can be a good jumping off point, right? And it can kind of start off a discussion and maybe facilitate. One of the things Elise mentioned was talking about communication and talking about expectations. So it can kind of help jumpstart that. So thank you for that additional information. I think we have a couple of minutes. Another question came in. What do you do when you are assigned a mentor, for example, for a faculty position, when that person does not know what you do? Anyone want to start off with that?
Oh, that's tough. I think that, you know, it's going to be a little bit of legwork on behalf of the mentee to essentially do a little bit of education for your mentor. To see if perhaps providing some of that background and experience that you have will help, you know, gauge whether or not that mentor, that prospective mentor, might be the right person to fit that particular goal. I know that we're a pretty niche field, and so if you end up getting paired up with a mentor, perhaps for faculty advancement, and that person is not familiar with genetic counseling, which many in higher leadership positions throughout institutions may not be, that it's definitely a barrier to kind of making that personality and experience mesh together. Perhaps at that point, it might, if it's not something where they have the proper experience or insight for a genetic counselor, it might be worth it to start thinking outside of your direct institution or network. Maybe start thinking about other genetic counselors in our field who might have already achieved a similar faculty position at another institution. Maybe reaching out to them to get a little bit more insight with that shared identity might be something that's helpful too.
And,
Yeah.
you know, I think what it really brings back to is, what is the objective, right? If the objective is to advance in faculty, like as a genetic counselor, like you might need to give some of the feedback or context, but you might not necessarily have all of the information as to how faculty reviews and that type of information works, right? So it's, what are you missing? What is the goal? And you don't have to have necessarily all of the shared experience. So really dialing back to what's the objective, what's the purpose.
And I think Tara's comment plays really well off of what you just mentioned, Deanna. She would argue not to worry about finding someone that you quote unquote connect with based off of shared hobbies, etc. Because like you just mentioned, really what is the down to brass tacks, what's the goal here? And so you don't have to be BFFs with somebody to be a successful mentor or mentee. And perhaps those types of relationships might also help push your growth as well.
And, to argue the other side, some people that might be very valuable in creating a relationship. So it really is understanding that self-awareness, understanding yourself, right? If you feel like you need to have connections outside of whatever the objective is to have a successful relationship, then pursue that. If you're really going to be task focused and focused on that aspect of mentorship, then do it that way. Each situation, each relationship is personal, right? And that's one of the reasons why we have challenges with this matching question. Going back to the first question, there's no right way to do it because everyone's different and every relationship is different.
Right. And I'll add to what Lauren had mentioned earlier is there may not be one mentor that fits all of the different things that you might need out of mentorship. So maybe you do have a mentorship that is a mentor that the focus is there's a specific goal, it's very task focused. And maybe you do have a mentor that it's more focused on that, personal connection with them, relationship, etc. So have more than one mentor if you can.
Thank you all so much. And thanks